fund these entrepreneurs out there, right? And because we get to actually, our customer base is the top 3-4% of it.
On the same old commodities, chasing hypervaluations, I think we would be in a better place.
Meaning can be very subjective.
Yeah.
Something that's entirely meaningful to me could be meaningless and harmful to others. So,
which leads me to Rainmatter's philosophy. What is it? Like, can you summarize it in 1 or 2 lines for a layperson to understand?
We do struggle with it, but at the core of it is a belief that we need to establish a relationship with our places, take charge of them, take responsibility, understand our own natural capital, our biodiversity a lot better. And India is a very biodiverse country. We have a lot of natural capital. And build our lives, our economies, our health, link all of these to our places in a much stronger way. We have lost that connect at scale.
So I'm curious, how did you come to that philosophy? Because it sounds like sort of decentralized action is what I'm sort of hearing, and that could be happening all over the world. I'm just curious whether you think there's something unique about India that you think we can address it better. Like, why are all the other climate scientists around the world not coming to the same conclusion as perhaps you are?
There is an immediate problem in terms of the carbon problem.
Yeah, the whole world talks about temperature and carbon,
rise,
right? So
yes, but those are symptoms of behaviors that led to it, and the same behaviors have led to many other problems. The forever plastics that we're talking about in terms of PFAS and other stuff. We're already starting to address methane, and there's 350,000 other materials that we inject into the biosphere. So all of them are going to show up in one form or the other, right? In terms of soil contamination, water contamination. There was a report from Auckland recently that per square meter, I think they have 5,000 measurable pieces of microplastics every year. And this is Auckland. This is not Faridabad, right? So it's not just one number, one metric, one material that's a problem, and then there are deep underlying causes for it. So when we started checking on this framing of the problem, the temperature to carbon to changes we need in transport and energy, and that's been the conversation across the world. The question that hit us was, where does this transport and energy go? What does it get used for? Is it efficient? And it's clearly not efficient in our designs, in our food systems, in how much fabric we are buying and how we dispose of it. It's just a disaster all over, right? So you can't really symptomatically fix it and hope it goes away. You will arrive at the next problem, and we are already arriving at the next problems, even when this is being solved. So I think once we started going down that rabbit hole, it became very obvious that just dealing with it in terms of EVs and solar panels is not going to cut it. So food systems became a very big part of the focus, because most of India is still agrarian. It is a huge loser of how the economic system is stacked up right now. And you might as well shoot for multiple wins for people, because that's when, like a forest that grows that the village doesn't care about is not going to last very long. But if people see linkages with the forest, they're going to not only preserve it, but actually expand it. So if their energy needs, if their food needs, if their economic needs, their health, all of this gets linked back to the forest, for instance, you have a much better proposition. So we started looking at it more holistically, and of course we still have more questions than answers, but yeah, that's where we are.
So climate, place-based, and sort of looking at transport and energy are the two sort of pillars that you're trying to solve for.
No, transport and energy is where we started with the world's framing of it.
Okay.
But then we moved much deeper.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where is it now? Like, how has it evolved?
So it's all of the above.
Okay.
It's in local entrepreneurship in a very big way.
Right.
Because your relationship with your land through economic activity is a big determinant of how you view your surroundings and your biodiversity.
Right. And that leads to health and pride and identities.
Yes.
This is what you've said on your website. So how does that link together?
Pride and identity are built around the stories that we tell each other. The stories around greed is good, shareholder value, perpetual growth, more consumption. Even finance ministers talk about more consumption being good for the country right now, while being oblivious to the long-term detriment that has.
Right, because things are being measured in GDP terms, right? We want to be a $5 trillion economy.
So can we change the stories?
Is it a story? Is it a belief? I mean, the belief, the underlying belief is that growth will solve everything. All boats will rise, and hopefully poverty will alleviate, and we'll sort of get everyone out of that. Right? That's the thinking, right? It's the...
Yeah, I think we are a few years past that already. Wouldn't you say? I think.
Are we? I mean, people are still basically shooting for growth. Companies and countries, for that matter. I mean, unless you start. I mean, what other measure would you give the finance minister or the prime minister and say, okay, can you also look at this?
So I think we are starting to measure it in terms of whose growth and what growth. If, for instance, in India, if you actually measure the air quality, the soil carbon, or the soil quality, water availability and security, village institutions, skills in the village, the livelihoods in the village. If you think of these as assets, because your current assets are a determinant of your future value, I think we have massive loss across the landscape. 95% of places in India would have numbers which look much worse than they looked, let's say, 50 years ago, across these numbers. So while we are chasing this one number on the GDP figures, especially
and perhaps
per capita
a few more things, like number of people living below $2 a day or something like that. Those are the measures. So your view on how can we influence the world to shoot for different metrics?
I don't really have an answer. I don't know either. But whatever we just discussed, it's not really an India problem. It's a global problem. That's exactly how every single country on the planet measures prosperity and growth. I think that fundamental idea in itself is wrong. Extracting from nature with zero regard for that extraction, and tying that into people's health and longevity and prosperity. I mean, that system can never sustain, right? And all of this stuff that we're talking about, it's only 100 years old, post-industrialization. So this whole notion of GDP was invented in the 30s. I can't recollect. Coined, not invented. So all of this is so new. If you look at the planetary scale, the planet has been around for 4.5 billion years. Recorded civilization has been around for 5,000 years. But our entire future outlook and destruction is based on 100 years of actions and evidence and activity. So if we try to ask each other questions, how can we fix this? I don't think it can be fixed. It needs a complete change. Now, how do you bring about change when the whole world is entrenched in these systems? I don't really know. Now, that is really one of the biggest follies of humanity. It's, we think of businesses as too big to fail. I mean, our civilization is now too big to fail. No matter how destructive it is, we have to keep propping it up because that's who we are, right? We have to exist. So I think about this every day to the detriment of my own mental sanity, but I don't have answers, and I don't think anybody has answers, and I don't think it's going to be an easy ride at all.
Okay, having said that, you've taken this on, right? You've taken on with Rainmatter this very big sort of thing. So walk us through, how are you making it winnable? How are you making this game winnable? If you're scaring us with, this is like the whole world is going down. Apart from feeling good about making an effort, talk us through what actions you're taking, where you think in your lifetime, you can see the needle move.
We are still hopeful more than optimistic, to be honest.
I agree. I mean, there's some hope. I mean, I'm sorry, I interrupted, but I just want to add this. I'm a pessimist, a realist. It's not subjective pessimism, it's hard evidence. But I'm a high functioning pessimist. If I didn't have some hope somewhere in me, I haven't been able to quantify, I don't think I'd be able to, exist and move forward and try all of this. So there is definitely hope in there. Sorry, Samir.
Yeah, and you were saying sort of hard numbers, and this is a question I asked earlier about being an optimist versus pessimist. Though, because the news focuses on pessimism, on the world is just going down a drain hole. Yet there are people like Hans Rosling in terms of like data-driven thing, and by and large, most things are actually getting better. And there are people in the world who actually think, no, things are getting better. Okay, so there's one little climate issue that is slight problem, but everything else is getting better, right? See, we have antibiotics, we can live longer, we have a generally good quality of life. We have electricity, we have running water, there are things that only 200 years ago, 300 years ago didn't exist. So the question that I guess I could perhaps on their behalf ask is, seriously, are you guys a bunch of pessimists that are making it a bigger deal than it is? I'm just generally asking. And if not, I agree it is an issue. What can we do now? I mean, can we do anything that is winnable apart from the COP conversation, the government's talking about whatever? What are you doing? And then let's talk about what other people can do. But so what's Rainmatter doing in that?
So, to the Hans Rosling thing, I mean, you can always cherry pick data and make it look amazing.
Okay.
And my question is, who's we?
Who's we?
Right?
Okay.
We have it better. You have to define. You have to ask that question.
Okay.
Who's we?
Okay.
And like somebody in the team quipped that, thankfully the supply chains left nothing on the plates of 95% of India, because people have lost so much. People have lost on incomes, adjusted for inflation. People have lost their assets. People have lost on health. We are not measuring health only in terms of the number of PHCs available out there, but in terms of outcomes. People have lost, the variety of livelihoods. Like my father was, he was noticing from the newspapers that today, if a bus conductor's kid makes it through the IS, it makes news. In the 70s, it didn't. Right? Is that not regression? Right? So I think we have to ask that question: who's we? And we found our answer. We found our hope in there. The assumption is that people who are losing from this would want to change it. They are implicitly invested in something different. Right? And if that something different can be biased towards our biodiversity, towards biology, towards regenerative economies, I think we may have a win. So there seems to be a possible pathway. How it emerges, what are the levers to drive that? Those are big questions. But thankfully, the COP discussions have been a little superfluous. They've not really driven action across the world. But it's given us a trigger and a space to drive effort at scale, like government down and civil society up, to look at models which would have not been looked at even 20 years ago. So, yeah.
So your work on the ground, can you put it into 3 buckets in terms of what you're trying to achieve on the climate change topic?
So there's large pockets of social capital where this change, this conversation needs to happen around, an assessment and ownership of our places, the visibility of the loss we've had, because that triggers action in huge ways. It's loss, but it's also opportunity, right? The bamboo at the Bangalore airport now is a lost opportunity, but there will be hundreds of new opportunities. The other set is people who have the solutions, but they're not available right now. They are tied up in a little program somewhere or a little POC. At scale, those are not the mainstream solutions. Can we massage them into available mainstream solutions across the landscape? That's the second set of people we are working with. And the third is people who either create or influence policy. Can we get them to start thinking in terms of mainstreaming these solutions, looking at needs and opportunity ground up, biasing it towards biodiversity, and creating an ecosystem of solutions around it rather than yet another scheme, yet another program which does a little in a narrow way but doesn't really address the mainstream.
Right.
So that's the hope.
So I'm hearing measurement in terms of where you live.
Yeah.
Funding lots of experiments, bottom up, that people are already doing it, and then talking to policymakers and seeing whether you can influence.
Yeah, not so much experiments. We believe that most of the solutions we need are out there.
Okay.
The work in the last few decades is magical. People have cracked almost everything you need to crack. It's just not available at scale. The mainstream looks very different.
And that's where your capital can help, right? That's kind of what you're hoping to do.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so coming back to sort of Rainmatter, we've gone sort of climate, health, I think financial inclusion, I guess, or livelihoods is another sort of theme. What other things do you want people to know that we haven't talked about?
I think it's rooted in the reconnect with our biology and our biodiversity. It's the idea of bioregionalism, but that's too technical a framing. So it's an understanding of your space, what you can do there, understanding your strengths. We have framed the problem for most of India in terms of weaknesses, in terms of need. But what are the strengths, skills, opportunities, resources that you have that you can build upon? Because it's very straightforward. If you don't trust biology, you're going to trust mining.
So if you don't trust?
Biology, you're going to trust mining.
Right.
Right? That's the set of choices you have. So right now, the planet needs us to build or rebuild around biology again.
Right.
Right. So can we start finding our answers, whether it's economics or health or livelihoods? Can we start finding answers in biology, in our biology, in our resources, right? In a way that it's regenerative, so that our places continue to support us. And when you add up all the places, it basically it's the planet.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So what are you hoping to achieve? People watching this video, and I'm going to give you, pretend to be a few different people. Say I'm another entrepreneur like you who's made a bit of money. I stumbled upon a snippet of this video. What are you hoping that I would do after watching this? Building on, hopefully being influenced by what you have done. What do you want me to do?
It's not just about organizations that have managed to make money.
Yeah.
It's just about being cognizant and start doing small little things. It could be at your household, it could be in your society, it could be within your business also.
Right.
So I cited one concrete example earlier, and it's a little far-fetched, but I care about it. So I'm happy that our technology infrastructure is lean and consumes only a fraction of the energy, let's say, some of the other organizations consume. Now, if many organizations thought like that and people wrote better software, better technology, not only would they in fact make a lot of money, they would also automatically reduce their footprint. And I think it's this mental framework that is necessary. And if you have that framework, you will naturally start making moves everywhere. So if a large number of people do that, right, I think it's just net positive. It's a win-win. You don't have to sacrifice anything. So my hope is that people who watch this video take away some of the principles and not really action. You don't need humongous amounts of capital to make a difference. That's a misconception. It's just this. Start thinking about these things. Start taking climate change seriously and see where you can make a small little move, take a small little action. Could be changing stuff inside your business, which will in fact make you more money also, ironically. So for me, it's just awareness. Why aren't we talking about this? In India, the tech industry is, there's so much that's talked about techno business, but barely about technology or efficiency of any of these things. It's all about money coming in, valuations, funding. Why is never sustainability of a business talked about, right? And sustainability of a business, even that word sustainability, you naturally gravitate towards some of these things. Why is that never really talked about, right? So my hope is that people at least take cognizance and think about these things.
That's at the individual action level. So that me being a normal person, I would do that, right? That's what you're saying?
Yes. So individual action is a tricky one, especially in the context of climate. There are big schools of thought. There's a large school of thought that says that individual action does not make a difference whatsoever. What can you do about the Pacific garbage patch if you don't use plastic straws? Fair enough. I mean, at a quantifiable level, that is true. But as we've discussed over the last hour or so, this is all really a societal civilizational problem, right? All of this happens because of our lust for, let's say, consumption. So it's all really rooted in human psyche, the way we look at success, progress, advancement, etc. And small little individual actions, it could be consciously reducing the amount of plastic you produce or whatever you do. If a large number of people started doing that, it might not undo the Pacific garbage patch or suck out carbon, but it will naturally reflect on all of these things that we've talked about. And what you really need is societal change, a shift. The kind of, when somebody who's conscious builds a business, it'll reflect in that business. When somebody who's conscious consumes something, it'll reflect in that consumption. And that will make a difference. Like one little action that I take at home may not, it doesn't change anything materially, but that being conscious, being aware, and being ethically committed to it, when enough number of people do it, that can happen. And the fact that we're sitting here and talking about all of this in Zerodha's context, and Zerodha is just one amongst millions of organizations. But because we've taken these steps, we've been conscious, that's why Rainmatter Foundation happened. So it's just a small group of people being conscious, being committed to this, that has made, I think, a small little difference. So imagine if millions of people thought like this, small little actions. It can permeate, it can be exponential. That's why I think it's important. It's not really about that one straw or that one plastic bottle. It's about all of this.
I suspect you're an optimist. So the question I was asking was, I guess one is to me as a middle class normal person watching this, and one is there are other people like Nithin watching this, right? So if there are other people who are sitting on a few thousand crores, should they call you and say, okay, let's get together and do this? Okay, is that kind of what you're hoping to do? Yeah, rather than them doing their own experiments.
So I think climate change or all of these outcomes are just like last 25 trillion bad trade-offs that we made as a species, right? I'm just pulling a number out of nowhere. Right?
Yeah.
But it's a series of bad trade-offs over 100 or 600 years, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah.
We just got to start making better trade-offs.
Right.
Whether as an individual, and it's an individual, right? Like it's your circle of influence. This decision happens as an individual.
Sure.
Right? If you're the Prime Minister of the country, your circle of influence is much larger.
Sure.